My fiancée, Delia King, is the long-lost heiress of a wealthy family who lived in the slums for 20 years before being found. I did everything in my power to help her become the center of attention as a socialite, only to be beaten into paralysis by her ex-boyfriend's thuggish friends. At my hospital bedside, she tearfully begged me to let the thugs go free. She said she loved him and didn't want him to go to prison. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't be her stepping stone into high society. I'd like to see how she, crude and foolish as she is, plans to become one of the elite. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. As I pulled back the covers, the stench of bodily waste assaulted my nostrils. The nurse's look of disgust made me want to sink into the floor, but I couldn't even move a finger. Delia King stood at a distance, her eyes brimming with tears that seemed artificial beneath her carefully applied makeup. "I'm sorry, Simon. I never thought things would turn out like this," she said. Zion Harris had his arm around her waist, his gaze towards me full of triumph and malice. "Zion only did this foolish thing because he loves me so much. I can't let him go to prison," Delia continued. "I'm grateful for your companionship, but the leading man in my life has already appeared. You love me so much, you'll understand, won't you?" She left without a backward glance. I closed my eyes tightly, hot tears falling. It was I who had supported her when she first returned to the King family, isolated and helpless. I had planned for her, used all my connections to pave her way into high society. Even Zion. She had said he was an old friend who had helped her, so I brought him into the company. Until Zion lied about her being kidnapped, and I rushed to save her only to be beaten half to death by men he had arranged. Only then did I learn he was her lover from before she returned home. On the television, the news was playing, King family heiress to wed business tycoon Zion Harris. Former boyfriend Simon Clark left paralyzed in accident. Parents hospitalized from shock. A tragic end for the devoted second lead. A tidal wave of hatred spread through me. The heart rate monitor let out a shrill alarm as I sank into darkness, consumed by bitter regret. "Simon? Simon!" I jolted awake, seeing my mum tugging at my sleeve with a worried expression. As I came to, her brow relaxed, and she gently patted my arm. "How did you fall asleep? Are you just pretending because you're too shy to admit you fancy Delia?" I looked around, confused. Delia King and her parents were sitting opposite us, and she was gazing at me coyly. I had somehow returned to the day we set our engagement. Seeing her expression, I felt a chill in my heart. In my previous life, she was always like this, never saying anything outright, but constantly giving me ambiguous hints and signals. I thought it was just a girl's shyness, so when our parents brought up the childhood betrothal, I openly admitted my feelings for her. She just blushed and stayed silent, not refusing. But later, when we were about to get engaged, she cried and said she didn't have romantic feelings for me yet. She claimed she only agreed because my family was much better off than the Kings, and she was afraid of disappointing her parents by refusing. Although I was heartbroken at the time, I still respected her wish and delayed the engagement. Now I realized she just didn't want to make Zion jealous. Gathering my thoughts, I forced a smile at the people across from me. "You can't just ask me, you know. We need to hear from Delia too." Delia's expression froze. Hearing this, her parents' faces lit up with joy. They asked her, "Delia dear, your brother is asking, do you fancy him?" She opened and closed her mouth, unable to speak for a long while. I took a sip of tea, inwardly sneering. If she said she fancied me, it would be betraying Zion. But if she said she didn't, she'd lose the Clark family as a powerful ally. Her silence made the atmosphere awkward, and both sets of parents started to look displeased. After struggling for a while, she still couldn't make up her mind. She looked at me imploringly, trying to get me to rescue her from the situation. So I broke the tension, smiling as I said, "It's my fault, don't pressure her." She breathed a sigh of relief. "I don't want to marry her." The smile that had barely formed on her face fell again. She looked at me, surprise in her eyes mixed with a hint of disappointment. Even though she had no feelings for me, My not fancying her seemed to displease her as well. Mum was also surprised and asked, "Really? You've been so nice to Delia since she came back. How can you not fancy her?" Mrs. King chimed in, "That's right, you two spend every day together. I thought you were very close." Everyone's scrutinizing gazes fell on me, but my expression remained unchanged. Delia is like a sister to me. As her brother, I should take care of her. If spending time together meant fancying someone, wouldn't that mean I've fancied Cindy for ages? As I spoke, the girl in the corner looked up in surprise, while Delia King's face darkened. Only then did Mr. and Mrs. King realize they had been neglecting their adopted daughter for a long time. Mrs. King beckoned to her. "Come here, Cindy. Come sit with Mum." Cindy King hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked towards us. She wore no makeup, quiet and gentle, just as I remembered her. Looking at her, I felt a pang of guilt. Before Delia came back, Cindy and I had a good relationship. I always treated her like a clingy but obedient little sister. But after Delia's return, Cindy's position became awkward. Add to that Delia's habit of playing the victim, intentionally or not, saying things like Cindy had stolen from her and how upset she was, and over time, Mr. and Mrs. King and I subconsciously began to neglect Cindy. She had completely inherited Mrs. King's gentle and quiet nature, never fighting or competing for anything. In the end, she even voluntarily left the King household. What I didn't expect was that after I was betrayed and left for dead by those closest to me, it was Cindy who took care of my parents in the hospital, managing everything for them. This debt of gratitude I must repay. My attitude put a definitive end to the arranged marriage. Though as our families were old friends, this wouldn't damage our relationship. Uncle and aunt invited us for dinner, and this time Cindy was present, rather than silently absent from the family gathering. Delia, probably spoiled by my past indulgence, hadn't yet realized my change. She kept wiping her tears and deliberately clanking her cutlery, even though I didn't spare her a single glance. After dinner, I stood in the garden for some fresh air. She approached me, her beautiful eyes brimming with tears, stubbornly blocking my path. I remained still, calmly watching her until she couldn't keep up the act and spoke first. "Simon, do you dislike me?" "Of course not. Don't overthink it." She seemed even more aggrieved, taking a step towards me and asking plaintively, "Then why did you earlier?" "What about earlier?" She faltered. Then, after a moment's silence, said, "You said you didn't have those feelings for me. It upset me." I feigned confusion. "Upset? Why? Do you like me?" Her eyes flickered, her words evasive. I just thought you were so nice to me. I assumed you liked me, so I was surprised." "I see." I put on a look of sudden realization. "It's a misunderstanding. Don't worry about it." "But why would you think that? Have you had a boyfriend who treated you that way?" Her eyes widened in panic. "No, I've never had a boyfriend." Then, as if something occurred to her, she asked, "Is that why you said you don't like me?" I chuckled lightly, not answering her question but asking instead, "Why are you so fixated on this?" Probably not expecting my usually gentlemanly self to be so confrontational, she kept backing away, hastily throwing out an "I have to go" before running off. Mum came out, her face rosy, looking so healthy and happy. I felt a pang in my heart and quickly went to hug her. Mum smiled even more brightly, hugging me back. "Our big man is actually being cuddly?" I held back the lump in my throat and hugged Mum tighter. "Yes. Get ready. There's more where that came from." Delia King's welcome party was approaching, and her aunt and uncle were taking it very seriously. They had decided that although they were welcoming Delia back, they wouldn't abandon Cindy King, whom they had raised for over 20 years. So, at the event, they would not only announce Delia's return but also inform everyone that Cindy would remain their daughter. When they announced this decision, Delia's eyes flashed with dissatisfaction, but she still forced a sweet and considerate smile, saying, "I'm happy to be Dad and Mum's daughter alongside my sister." Cindy had been trained in strict etiquette since childhood and was well versed in high society relationships. She was supposed to prepare the entire party, but Delia volunteered to take on the guest invitation part. The next morning, she came to find me while I was discussing a recent project with Cindy. Seeing her, Cindy excused herself, and Delia acted as if this was perfectly normal. I felt a bit uneasy. She was just as I remembered her, seemingly happy with her parents' decision yesterday, but now in front of me, she was saying how hurt and insecure she felt, believing that her parents favored Cindy over her. I knew my aunt and uncle weren't the type to play favorites, but I still felt sorry for her tears and suggested throwing a welcome party just for her. I personally arranged the entire event, using the Clark family connections to invite top-tier industry leaders to attend, making everyone in our circle aware of her status and importance to me. It was also her first real step into high society. Now, as she deliberately rubbed her eyes red and asked me, "Simon, do you think Mum and Dad think I'm too stupid?" I replied, "Yes." She froze, forgetting to lower her hand. I explained slowly, "I mean, Cindy is indeed better at these things than you are, but I want to try and help the family too. I've already said I'd handle the guest invitations. If I can't do it well, Mum and Dad will think I'm even less capable than my sister." She showed obvious panic and impatience, her eyes fixed on me, silently pleading for help. I fiddled with the ceramic dog in my hand, completely ignoring her hints. "Then you should ask Cindy for advice. She's always been good at these things." She couldn't accept this suggestion at all, her expression turning resentful. "Simon, are you looking down on me? I feel like you've changed so much." She stood up, looking as if she was about to storm out. In the past, I would have panicked and immediately agreed to all her requests. I put down the figurine and met her gaze directly. "You're the one who's changed." I frowned, looking her up and down as if appraising goods. "Cindy is your sister. Why are you angry that I want you to learn from her? Or were you just pretending before?" Her face flushed red in an instant, as if I'd hit a sore spot, but she couldn't find any excuse to refute. In the end, she could only shed a few cheap tears and accuse, "I understand now. I won't bother you anymore." Then she ran off angrily. "I think you've changed too." Cindy appeared at the doorway, looking at me. My heart tightened, but I asked casually, "For the better?" She blinked, and after a moment, nodded. I felt a long-lost sense of comfort. We hadn't talked so easily in a long time, to the point where I had almost forgotten that she was my family too. That's good then. Without my help, Delia King had made a complete mess of things. She had no idea about the intricate web of relationships in our social circle, which led to her proposed seating arrangements being repeatedly rejected. In the end, it turned into a huge embarrassment. The Hughes family, who were close friends of the Kings, had suffered a tragedy last month when Mrs. Hughes fell and lost her 5-month pregnancy. Yet Delia wrote on their invitation, "We cordially invite your happy family of 3 to attend our celebration." This infuriated Mr. Hughes so much that he stormed to their house and threw the invitation in her face. The elderly Kings couldn't argue and could only apologize profusely with forced smiles. Finally, they ordered her to stop managing the event and handed everything over to Cindy King. The news spread quickly, and many people were secretly laughing at the situation. However, out of respect for my fondness for her, no one mentioned it to my face, leaving me without anyone to share in the amusement. On the day of the family introduction party, I arrived at the entrance at the scheduled time. As expected, I saw a man arguing with the security guards at the door. Zion Harris looked disheveled, wearing wrinkled shorts and a t-shirt, shouting aggressively, "Let go of me. Do you know who I am? I'm your ladies' man. Who do you think you are to stop me?" His scrawny build was clearly no match for the security guards, but they were unaccustomed to dealing with such a rowdy troublemaker in these upper-class circles, and were struggling to subdue him. In my previous life, I had dismissed him as some random lunatic, fearing he would disrupt Delia's party, and had him dragged away. Somehow, he had managed to sneak back in, causing a scene at the party. At the time, Delia had been vague, only saying he was a former friend. It was a crucial moment for her return to high society, and being associated with someone like him would have made people look down on her. I had no choice but to claim Zion was my friend, taking on the embarrassing burden myself. He harbored resentment towards me for my previous actions, pretending to be harmless while I introduced him to various high-class events. Gradually, he built his own network of connections and eventually crippled me, taking everything I had. Suppressing the urge to have him killed on the spot, I approached the security guards. The butler looked at me anxiously. "Mr. Clark, this man came out of nowhere, claiming that he and our young lady. I really can't let him in for an event like this." Zion, like a rabid dog that had been kicked, immediately raised his fist at the butler. "What the hell do you mean?" I looked at him with contempt. "It seems any stray cat or dog thinks they can come for a free meal. Find a place to deal with him, and make sure he doesn't have the strength to crawl back," I said. "There are many people here today to test your young lady. It wouldn't look good if others saw this." His expression became even more ferocious. "UF." The old butler, alerted by my reminder, became serious and immediately had someone cover Zion's mouth and drag him away. Seeing the security guards get serious, Zion instantly lost his bravado. He squirmed and struggled like a mudfish, looking both pathetic and amusing. In the center of the ballroom, Delia King stood in her exquisite designer gown, surrounded by a crowd of sycophants. She beamed with delight, as if the harsh criticism she'd faced just days ago had been directed at someone else entirely. I stood at a distance, waiting patiently like a hunter as more and more people gathered around her. Finally, when all the guests had arrived, I made my move. The crowd parted for me, their eyes darting between Delia and me, their scrutiny of her now tinged with wariness. She, however, grew even more smug, deigning to look at me as she asked, "Can I help you with something?" I leaned in close and whispered in her ear, "Someone outside claims to be your boyfriend." "That's impossible. You said you'd never dated anyone." So I immediately had security rough him up. "Don't worry, Delia. He's barely breathing now. He won't be bothering you." She immediately panicked, blurting out, "How could you hurt him?" before rushing towards the exit. The guests exchanged bewildered glances. I let out a contrived sigh, picked up a glass of champagne, and went to find Aunt and Uncle. When Delia stormed back in, oblivious to the strange atmosphere around her, her eyes blazed with fury as she pointed at me and shouted, "You did that on purpose!" The bustling ballroom fell silent. I feigned innocence and edged closer to Aunt. Aunt quickly pulled Delia aside and hissed, "Delia King, how dare you speak to Simon like that?" Delia persisted, "Mom, he hurt someone." Aunt remained composed. "Simon explained everything to me. He was only trying to protect you from unsavory characters. Why are you so upset? Or do you actually know someone like that?" Delia finally realized her faux pas. She looked around at the elegantly dressed guests, knowing their acceptance hinged on her response. After a moment's deliberation, her eyes hardened with resolve. Just as she was about to speak, I quickly interjected, "Let's not dwell on this, Aunt. All the guests have arrived. It's time. It wouldn't do to sever ties so soon, would it? You two should remain tightly bound together until life becomes unbearable." The guests had witnessed the entire scene, and soon a friend approached me to inquire, "I thought young Mr. Clark was quite taken with this newly discovered heiress? It doesn't seem that way to me." I glanced around at the onlookers and replied loud enough for all to hear, "All this talk of real and fake. They're both Uncle and Aunt's children. I'm just doing my duty, that's all." Uncle and Aunt introduced Delia King, but without my support, everyone's reception was lukewarm, clearly not meeting Delia's expectations. However, she masked it well, maintaining her composure. After her introduction, Cindy King came down from upstairs. She was wearing a light blue mermaid dress, exuding elegance and grace. Everyone spontaneously burst into applause, their eyes showing more sincerity than before. I noticed the malice in Delia's eyes and felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I took the initiative to hold Cindy's hand, saying, "Those heels might be tricky. Let me help you down." I remembered the last time she walked here. She suddenly seemed to trip on something and fell, tumbling down in a rather undignified manner. Delia had insinuated that she was deliberately seeking attention, but now it seemed clear that foul play was involved. Cindy looked surprised, her fair skin tinged with a light blush as she gently gripped my hand. I held her steadily, but halfway down, a sharp pain shot through my ankle. I looked down to see a very concealed corner filled with sharp glass shards. If I hadn't been mentally prepared, I might have fallen too. "What's wrong?" Cindy noticed my discomfort and looked worried. I shook my head. "It's nothing." So Delia had already become this deceitful and malicious. I gave her a cold look, and she averted her gaze, her eyes flickering. However, I couldn't hide it from Cindy. After dealing with the guests, she immediately pulled me into the sitting room. She rolled up my trouser leg, revealing my bloodied ankle. She froze, her eyes welling up with tears as she looked at me. I smiled and patted her head. "It's really nothing. Just looks worse than it is." Before I could finish, she lunged at me like a small bird, burying herself in my embrace. Her slender shoulders shook with sobs, her soft body enveloped in my arms. It took me a moment to react, gently hugging her back, feeling my heart begin to race. As the party was winding down, I spotted Delia hiding in a corner. "I told you today wasn't the right time. Why did you still come? They haven't even fully accepted me yet. How could I possibly introduce you?" The person on the other end of the phone said something, and her tone softened. "I know you did it because you love me, and I love you too. Don't be upset, all right? How about I transfer you £10,000 first?" After ending the call, she looked around, not noticing me in the shadows, and left with a spring in her step. Watching her excited departure, I couldn't help but laugh. In my previous life, Zion Harris had also borrowed money from me. I later found out he was gambling and even visiting prostitutes. That was why I never suspected his relationship with Delia. Now it seems Delia was also being played by him. But as I laughed, I only felt pity, because I was fortunate enough to never have to worry about money. My parents had protected me too well, leaving me completely unprepared for the evil in human nature. That's why I was so easily manipulated by such vile and malicious people. I paid with my life to see the truth, and I will never show them any mercy again. I had someone keep an eye on Zion Harris. His life took a dramatic turn after that day, not only frequenting high-end establishments but also moving to a new residence. Delia King also started going out more often, returning home each time with a radiant expression, clearly in high spirits. When she first came back, her aunt and uncle gave her a bank card with a considerable amount. She hadn't been seen buying much before, but now she was spending generously. Word of their lavish spending quickly spread, and many were eager to curry favor with them. For a time, they were the talk of the town. However, Delia had no profitable assets. I wondered how long she could keep up this lifestyle of all outgoing and no incoming funds. I stopped managing things for her and focused solely on running my own company. Learning from my past life's lessons, my actions and decisions became more decisive and calm, much to my parents' satisfaction. Before long, the private investigator informed me that an underground casino had taken notice of Zion. They deliberately sent someone to befriend him. Zion, being a gambler at heart, was already itching to play. Sure enough, within a few days he started gambling again. The investigator diligently reported that Zion left the casino looking very excited after his first visit. He continued to go for several days after that, his eyes growing more frenzied each time. On one occasion, he even covered the tab for everyone at the pub, seemingly quite pleased with himself. I smirked. This was a classic scam by underground casinos. They first entice gamblers with small wins, encouraging them to bet larger amounts, slowly trapping them until they lose everything. As expected, a few days later, the investigator reported, Zion left for the last time looking very upset, with casino enforcers by his side. They exchanged some words before letting him go. Just as I finished reading the message, Delia burst into my office. Her eyes were frantic as she grabbed me, ignoring my assistant's attempts to stop her. "Simon, can you lend me some money, please?" I waved my assistant away and withdrew my arm. Delia's brow furrowed, looking utterly helpless. "I'm at my wit's end. You were the first person I thought of because I believe with you by my side. I can solve anything," she said. I asked, "Why do you need to borrow money? Has something happened?" She shook her head, appearing remorseful. "I've just realized my parents' wedding anniversary is coming up, and I haven't had time to prepare a proper gift. I wanted to rent a venue to celebrate for them. But I don't have enough money, so I need to borrow some. Can you help me, please?" She sniffled, wiping away non-existent tears. I felt nauseated by this affected performance. In my previous life, when she said this, I felt a surge of duty and immediately transferred the money. Later, when her parents celebrated their anniversary at home, I assumed she had bought something else and never thought to ask her to repay the loan. Little did I know she was using the money to pay off her crush's gambling debts. I feigned a look of sudden realization and generously offered, "Of course I can. Would £100,000 be enough?" Her face lit up, surprised by my quick agreement. Her tone became more coquettish. "That's plenty. I'm so happy, Simon. You've been ignoring me lately. I thought you'd grown to dislike me." I remained noncommittal, seeing her off with a few words. Sure enough, I soon received new information. Zion Harris had gone to the casino again, but this time no one left with him. He's been staying at home since. After lending the money, I never brought it up, and Delia acted as if it was perfectly normal. Later, when her family came to visit, I casually asked, "Delia, how's the venue decoration coming along?" She didn't react at first, taking a moment to realize what I was referring to. Her eyes darted nervously. "Oh, it's almost ready. Thank you, Simon. But we'd like to keep it just family for this occasion, so we can't invite you." I nodded, continuing to show interest. "That's all right. Where have you booked the venue? Perhaps I could help." She hadn't expected me to ask for such details and remained silent. I pressed on. "Come on, Delia, tell me. Your parents will be here soon. Don't let them spoil your surprise." She grew increasingly anxious, but her nervousness stemmed from fear of her lie being exposed. As her parents approached, she reached her breaking point. Finally, she hurriedly whispered an address, her voice so faint as if hoping I wouldn't catch it. Surprisingly, the place she randomly chose was quite a coincidence. Ever since I gave Zion Harris that £100,000, Delia King had been in a foul mood. It wasn't a small sum, so her anger was understandable. But I hadn't expected her temper to cool so quickly. That girl is so strange. I saw her receive several parcels yesterday, all filled with knockoff clothes. Yet she was over the moon about it, my mum said. Both her mum and I tried to convince her to buy the real thing if she liked it so much. But she insists on wearing those fakes out and about. Mum's expression was complex, clearly perplexed by Delia's behavior. But her good manners prevented her from saying more. I smirked and replied, "Perhaps they're from someone important to her." Since I last asked about the venue, Delia had been deliberately avoiding me. Mr. and Mrs. King sensed something was off, but naturally couldn't get anything out of Delia. I just laughed it off, and though they were disappointed, they didn't press the matter. Until one morning when I drove up to the King's house, offering them a lift. Mr. and Mrs. King were surprised but pleased. Cindy, their younger daughter, tilted her head curiously at me. "Thank you, Simon, but our plans for today are a bit complicated." "We wouldn't want to trouble you," Mrs. King said. My gaze fell on Delia, who was engrossed in her phone. I smiled and said, "It's no trouble, Mrs. King. I know your plans, but I need to take you somewhere. Don't worry, it'll be a surprise." After a moment's hesitation, they decided to come along. Delia, however, was reluctant. "Mom, Dad, I've made plans with a friend. I'm worried it might be rude if I don't show up." The three in the car looked uncomfortable at her words. I persuaded her, "If they're really your friend, they'll understand." She finally got in the car, albeit unwillingly. Seeing the tense atmosphere, Cindy tried to lighten the mood, which seemed to ease Mr. and Mrs. King's expressions. Delia sat to the side, looking utterly disdainful. As Cindy chattered away, we slowly arrived at our destination. They all looked confused as they saw the manor house before them. "Simon, where have you brought us?" Mr. King asked. I turned back and answered, "You should ask Delia that." Meeting her bewildered gaze, I smiled innocently. "Right, Delia? Isn't this where you've prepared a surprise for your parents?" Her body trembled violently as she finally remembered that today was Uncle and Aunt's wedding anniversary. Immediately, a greater panic appeared on her face. Uncle and Aunt, however, were delighted by my words. "You little rascal, keeping this from us until now. Can you tell Mum what the surprise is now?" She couldn't say anything, so I helpfully added, "Aunt, you wouldn't believe it. Delia suddenly came to me to borrow money. It gave me quite a fright. Turns out she wanted to book this manor to celebrate for you today." As I spoke, I opened the car door and led them towards the entrance. As we got closer, Delia's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. Uncle and Aunt didn't notice her unusual behavior at all, until the family was stopped by a stern-faced security guard. "Sorry, no unauthorized persons allowed." This was a restaurant converted from a private manor, only accessible with prior reservation, which they clearly didn't have. The two elders, having maintained their dignity for most of their lives, were momentarily embarrassed. Uncle patiently said, "Sir, we've booked the entire venue. You can check." The guard looked Uncle up and down, his tone somewhat complex. "We never accept full bookings. You may have been deceived." With the conversation having reached this point, and two guests coincidentally entering at that moment, giving them appraising looks, Uncle and Aunt were losing face. "Delia, what's going on?" Delia's lips trembled, her eyes blinking nervously. Finally finding an excuse, she explained with an innocent and aggrieved expression, "I'm sorry, Mum and Dad. I forgot to tell Simon. I later thought it wasn't appropriate, so I used the money to buy gifts instead. I didn't expect him to be so enthusiastic about bringing us here. It's not his fault, it's all my mistake." Her tone was remorseful, yet her words subtly suggested this was my error. Of course, I couldn't allow that. So that's what happened. I was too impulsive. But a £100,000 gift. Uncle and Aunt will surely love it. Hearing this, their expressions darkened further, almost unable to maintain their composure. £100,000 wasn't much to me, but it was still a significant amount for the King family. £100,000. Delia, what kind of gift costs so much money? I knew very well that no matter how angry they were, they wouldn't make a scene in public. So I stepped forward to mediate. "Aunt, please calm down. Besides, standing here isn't solving anything." After saying this, I looked at Cindy, winking at her. She hesitated for a moment, but quickly understood. Though reluctant, she stepped forward and said, "Dad, Mum, don't be angry. Let's go inside first." Uncle's face was grim. "Cindy, you just heard. This place requires a reservation." Cindy smiled, appearing calm and composed. "The manor owner is my friend. She won't let us down." Delia's face grew even more unpleasant, as if she'd been slapped. Sure enough, someone soon came out respectfully to escort us inside. After entering the room, the two elderly people became serious, their eyes sharp as they looked at Delia King. "Tell us, what exactly did you buy?" They now understood that their daughter most likely hadn't borrowed money from me to buy gifts. Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Delia dropped to her knees with a thud. "I'm sorry, Mum and Dad. It's my friend. His mother is ill and needs a large sum of money. But you don't like me associating with my old friends, and I was afraid of disappointing you, so I lied and borrowed money from Simon. I know I shouldn't have done this, but I've left you before, and I really couldn't bear to see my friend lose a parent." She really knew how to hit their weak spots. Mr. and Mrs. King's expressions softened, showing some emotion, and they were about to reach out to help her up. Cindy King spoke before I could. If that's the case, why don't we all go to the hospital to see the patient? After all, this money is Simon's, and we should see for ourselves to be at ease. If the situation is really bad, we could even offer more help. I agreed. That's right. Why did you have to lie to me? If you had told me the truth, I would have helped you anyway. Mr. and Mrs. King withdrew their hands, their expressions thoughtful. That's a good point. Delia, come with us to see the patient. Her lies were being unraveled one by one, forcing her into a corner. Then she did something bewildering. She stood up shakily, then, as if unable to support herself, closed her eyes and collapsed. Silence spread throughout the room. Mr. and Mrs. King's faces darkened several shades. They took several deep breaths before calming down, their tone decisive and cold. Let's call the police. Her eyelids twitched slightly. Mrs. King looked at Cindy, her tone even more certain. Cindy, call the police. I want to see who actually has such a large sum of money. Cindy glanced at the person on the floor, nodded, and was about to dial the number. Delia couldn't hold back anymore and suddenly grabbed Cindy's trouser leg. Don't call the police. She bit her lip and sat up under her parents' angry and disappointed gaze, confessing, I gave the money to my boyfriend. She revealed everything about Zion Harris. Mr. and Mrs. King were so angry their hands were shaking. How could you fall for such a gambling addict? She passionately defended Zion. He's not a bad person. He was led astray by others. He promised me he would pay back the money immediately. Mom, Dad, if you don't believe me, I'll let him tell you himself. She frantically opened her phone to call Zion. As soon as it connected, without waiting for him to speak, she asked, Zion, you said you'd pay back the money right away, didn't you? There was silence on the other end for 2 seconds. Then the call was disconnected. Delia's eyes widened in disbelief, and she tried to call back. It's impossible. He wouldn't avoid this. There must be something wrong with the phone. There must be. Enough. Mr. King slammed the table hard, causing her phone to fly out of her hand. How long are you going to remain so blind? Despite their anger, Uncle and Aunt stuck to their principles and returned the money to me. Seeing their gloomy expressions, I said, Don't be sad, Aunt. Cindy has another gift for you. They were clearly apprehensive about this word now, so I continued. She secured the development rights for that plot in the north of the city a few days ago. It was a new commercial area waiting to be developed. If managed well, it could generate at least millions in annual net profit. This was absolutely a golden opportunity for the King family. Suddenly, that small loss from earlier seemed insignificant. Aunt affectionately pulled Cindy close, her tone playfully reproachful. Such big news, and Simon knew before us. It seems he's more important to you than we are. Cindy's ears turned red from the implication in Aunt's words. I said, It was all to surprise you today. Uncle nodded approvingly, his gaze falling on Delia. At least this is a real surprise. In the face of enormous profits, everyone can't help but favor those who bring benefits. Cindy chatted and laughed with Uncle and Aunt, completely ignoring Delia, who was still sitting pitifully on the floor. From the corner of my eye, I saw resentment building in her eyes as she looked at the contacts on her phone, angrily deleting Zion Harris. But how could Zion easily let go of such a big fish? He had grown accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, and without Delia's support, he would soon be struggling to make ends meet. He started appearing frequently near the King family home. However, Delia had recently been given the cold shoulder at home due to the money incident. Uncle, Aunt, and Cindy were all busy with the new project. I took the initiative to liaise with partners alongside them, attending countless social engagements daily. Though nothing was explicitly said, smart people could see my different attitudes towards the two King daughters. Those who once sought to curry favor with Delia gradually became distant, refusing her invitations even when she took the initiative. Delia didn't understand anything, so even when she tried to force her way in, she only embarrassed herself. Now even the servants in the King household were more respected than her. So even when Zion approached her several times with a face full of deep affection, she just walked away expressionlessly. But I knew very well that she couldn't remain indifferent forever. Zion knew this too. He had an innate talent for being clingy and persistent. No matter how others mocked or ridiculed him, he remained unmoved, appearing in the empty space outside Delia's window. He even managed to send in a cheap ring and card he had made. Although Delia didn't come out to see him, she spent more time lingering by the window each day. On a rainy night, as I drove home, I saw Zion standing in the rain in the middle of the road from afar. I turned off my headlights, and the black car body blended into the night. After about 10 minutes, he shrugged his shoulders, seemingly giving up hope of meeting her. He muttered a crude curse under his breath and was about to leave. Suddenly, someone rushed out and hugged him tightly from behind. Delia, wearing a thin dress, shouted at him emotionally, "You idiot! Were you going to wait all night if I didn't come out?" Zion immediately reacted, hugging her back. "Of course. Nothing is more important than you. I know you're upset about what happened that day. Although I accidentally hung up the phone, I don't want to explain anything. If you're angry, it's my biggest mistake." Zion, deeply moved by his words, Delia stood on her tiptoes and kissed him in the pouring rain. My assistant quietly said, "How can such a trick fool a wealthy young lady?" I chuckled softly. "Can fool her. She just loves this kind of cheap, fake sincerity." Simon, Delia's gone missing. The next morning, my aunt and uncle appeared at my bedroom door, looking distraught. She held a piece of paper in her hand, which I took and quickly scanned. It was written by Delia, essentially saying she was disappointed with the family, felt unloved by her parents, and since she was unwanted, she might as well leave on her own. My aunt's eyes were red and swollen, her whole demeanor much more haggard, as she sank into self-reproach. "It's all my fault for being too strict with her. I should have been more patient." My uncle also looked guilty. I watched them, feeling a sense of déjà vu. In my previous life, when Cindy left the King family, they gave her a sum of money. Delia had always resented this, to the point that when her parents later fell seriously ill, she didn't even come to see them once. I put my arm around her shoulder and told them what I had seen the night before. "Aunt, it's not your fault. She left willingly with that man." But my aunt became even more convinced. "It's all his fault. He's the one who corrupted my daughter." The words caught in my throat, and I could only comfort them by saying I would do my best to find Delia. I also advised them to cancel Delia's cards, saying that when she ran out of money and experienced hardship, she would naturally come home. But what parents could bear to let their child go hungry? They agreed to my suggestion at the time, but according to Cindy's observations, they ended up giving Delia even more money. Cindy was worried this might interfere with our plan to find them, but I said it didn't matter and not to stop it. I had been keeping track of Zion's movements all along. But I knew very well that only when my aunt and uncle were sufficiently guilty, anxious, and worried would they truly give up when they learned the truth. They truly loved Delia. Even after asking for my help, they continued to reach out to their connections for information, barely sleeping. By the third day, they had fallen ill. Standing by my aunt's hospital bed, looking into her eyes that were weary and sorrowful to the extreme, I said, "I've found her." I wanted to let them rest before we went looking, but the elderly couple immediately removed their 4 lines, insisting on coming with me. On the way, they kept asking about Delia. "Where's Delia? Is she all right? When she comes back, we won't be angry with her anymore." Yes, a young girl out there alone, who knows what hardships she might face. They held hands tightly, their expressions a mix of tension and excitement, despite the bandages still on their arms where the IVs had been. Their hopeful expressions shattered completely when they saw Delia King, the center of attention. I parked the car by the pier, where a luxurious yacht had just docked. A row of staff bowed deeply, welcoming the disembarking passengers. Flashily dressed men and women surrounded Delia and Zion Harris. She tilted her chin up slightly, accepting their adoration as if it were her due. Zion's hand rested on her bare waist. He wore a gaudy, tacky leopard print shirt and kissed her shamelessly in front of everyone. Her aunt and uncle stood frozen in the shadows of a tree, unsure how to react as they watched the scene unfold across the way. "Did those old folks bother you today?" Delia asked, her expression cold. "Yeah. They sent a bunch of rubbish messages and transferred 50,000 pounds. Zion replied with a greasy smile, his eyes glinting. "That's the way to do it. Give them the cold shoulder for a while, make them worry. Then they'll be easier to manipulate. Babe, ask them for more money. We can buy a sports car, and I can take you anywhere you want to go." Delia carelessly tossed her towel to a staff member. "We'll talk about it in a few days. I'm not in the mood to deal with them right now." Overwhelmed with anger, her uncle began to shake. Finally unable to contain himself, he rushed over and slapped Delia across the face. "You ungrateful child. Is this how you see us?" He had used all his strength. The force of the blow turned her head to the side. Zion, not knowing who this man was, sized up the older gentleman and raised his fist menacingly. "How dare you hit my woman? Do you have a death wish?" I stepped in front of her uncle, catching Zion's fist, then kicked him into the water. Delia snapped out of her shock and screamed, scrambling to the railing to check on Zion. Seeing him flailing in the water, her eyes filled with hatred. "So what if it is? What right do you have to hit me?" she spat. "If you hadn't favored Cindy over me, would I be like this? Your money is rightfully mine. This is your fault. Only Zion truly loves me. If anything happens to him, I'll kill you both." Her aunt, stung by her words, stumbled backwards. I quickly steadied her. She slowly wiped away her tears. "Fine, if that's how you feel, then I no longer have a daughter. I mean it. Don't come begging me to return." I seized the opportunity, saying, "Delia King, if you're cutting ties, then they no longer have any obligation to support you. You'll need to pay back all the money they've given you." It wasn't a small sum. Her aunt hesitated, so I lowered my voice to advise her. "I just want her to see that man's true colors. If you soften now, he'll only become more emboldened." Her aunt's resolve strengthened. She looked at Delia and said, "Come back with me now and promise to end things with him, and we'll pretend this never happened. Otherwise, we'll cut ties, and you'll be left with a massive debt." Zion was still struggling in the water, his face turning blue from the prolonged submersion. Delia was distraught. "I don't need your money." Her aunt closed her eyes, pained by the words. I handed her to my assistant and quickly produced a contract, presenting it to Delia. "Then sign this, and I'll help get him out of the water." Delia looked at me, her eyes full of reproach, as if blaming me for my heartlessness. I remained unmoved. Her hand trembled at the shocking figures in the document, but she finally grit her teeth and signed. I signaled for someone to pull Zion out of the water and carefully tucked away the papers. My heart raced with excitement, eager to see how their story would unfold. Zion Harris woke up demanding to be moved to a luxury private room, his unreasonable and aggressive behavior making it impossible for the nurses to handle him. I walked into the room, and his expression soured further at the sight of me. "What are you doing here?" he spat. "Don't think you're all that just because you've got a bit of money. I'm a wealthy man's son-in-law now, you remember that. I'll have my revenge sooner or later." I looked at him and smiled. "If you're so flush, why don't you start by paying back the 20,000 pounds? He froze, his gaze wary. "Have you gone mad? What 20,000 pounds? I tossed the documents at him, pronouncing each word clearly. "Delia King has cut ties with her family for your sake. So all the assets previously given to her must be returned. You know full well how much you've spent. This is just the first installment." At that moment, Delia entered the room. Seeing him awake, her face lit up with joy. But before she could share a tender moment, Zion grabbed her wrist, his voice urgent. "Darling, is what he's saying true?" Delia tried to pull her hand away but couldn't. She had no choice but to answer him, "Yes, you were right. They never really loved me. I may not be Miss King anymore, but now we can be together properly. If we work hard together, we'll be able to pay back this money in no time. Don't you think?" Zion's expression had turned utterly sour, but he still managed to force a smile as he stiffly hugged Delia. "Of course. I had someone check their accounts. Their savings now amounted to exactly £20,000. I wasn't in a hurry. Watching them struggle step by step was more satisfying than a single fatal blow." After the money was transferred, Zion made an excuse to send Delia away. He looked at me, his tone certain. "You think I don't know your game? You want her to suffer enough to leave me, don't you? It won't happen. I have all the time in the world to play this out with you. I want to see how long those two old fools are willing to let her suffer." As I watched his obsessive, manic behavior, I couldn't help but marvel. Such a selfish, vicious person who deceives others is nothing but a curse to anyone who gets involved with him. They had just managed to repay their debt and were living in relative harmony, albeit in a cheaper place but still getting by. Neither of them had jobs, so when the second month's payment was due, Zion Harris sold his family home back in his hometown to show Delia King his commitment. He firmly believed his investment would yield substantial returns. However, the third month's debt arrived sooner than any turnaround. He couldn't produce anything, so Delia had to pawn her designer handbags to cover the debt. By this point, they were both penniless and had to find work. But the fourth month's payment amount was exactly the sum of their combined wages. Zion couldn't maintain his previous composure and said to the finance officer with a grim expression, "You're doing this on purpose." The officer replied, "You're overthinking it. This figure is already quite lenient." To make matters worse, Delia chimed in, "That's right, Zion. It's much less this time. Don't lose heart, we just need to be a bit more frugal." His expression twisted to the extreme. Not only that, I deliberately let him know about the recent news from the King family, especially how Mr. and Mrs. King valued Cindy King, and which projects she had successfully completed. In the fifth month, the finance officer informed me that they couldn't make the payment, and Zion had become physically abusive towards Delia. The King family's silence towards Delia for nearly half a year had shaken his previous assumptions. He realized that Delia had truly been abandoned, and not only had he failed to get any money, but he had also lost his house and incurred an astronomical debt. He completely fell out with Delia, revealing his true nature. Yet Delia, despite being beaten, remained delusional, convinced that Zion was just under too much pressure. The two continued to torment and entangle each other, eventually moving into a cramped, crowded basement flat. Their clothes were all from charity shops, and they could only afford to live on bread rolls. Zion went to the underground gambling den once again. One day not long after, I received an anonymous call. "I've got your sweetheart," the voice said. I instinctively glanced at Cindy King, who was sitting next to me, focused on her meal. "Who?" I asked. The caller paused, then spoke more frantically. "Don't play dumb with me. Do as I say, or you'll never see Delia King again." It was Zion. "I don't like her." "You're threatening the wrong person," I replied calmly. "Oh, really?" he said menacingly. Suddenly, I heard the muffled sound of something striking flesh, followed by Delia's stifled cries, as if her mouth was covered. My heart sank. "What are you trying to do?" He laughed, sounding unhinged and wild. "I knew you liked her." I was at a loss for words, merely startled by his madness. "Zion, she's your girlfriend. How could you do this to her?" "To hell with girlfriend. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be in so much gambling debt. Listen here, get £10 million ready. If you dare call the police, you'll be picking up the pieces." "That's quite a demand. I might be able to give it, but are you brave enough to spend it?" I deliberately prolonged the conversation, signaling Cindy with my eyes to call the police immediately. Zion was caught off guard and simply said, "That's none of your business. My patience is running out, so you'd better hurry." "All right," I said, fearing he might hang up. "How do I get the money to you? And how can you guarantee you'll release Delia?" He sneered. "You're in no position to negotiate. Just get the money ready, and I'll contact you." He hung up abruptly, and I received a photo. It showed a woman's lower leg, covered in bruises. A chunk of flesh had been carved out of her calf, the gaping wound a horrifying sight. Cindy looked at it, her face pale. How can he be so cruel? Won't calling the police behind his back make him angrier? I locked my phone and calmly reassured her. He's already lost it. The police are more equipped to handle people like this than we are. If we don't report it, we'll only be more vulnerable. Cindy King's prompt call to the police was crucial. Even though Zion Harris hung up quickly, the police were able to narrow down the general area. However, he was cunning, constantly using different numbers to contact me, making it difficult for the police to pinpoint his location. I could only do my best to keep him talking. His emotions were very unstable. While contacting me, he kept sending pictures of Delia King being tortured. The once young and vibrant woman was now bruised all over, her eyes becoming more vacant with each photo. Every time I received a photo, I immediately shared it with the police for analysis. They were surprised by my attitude. Usually, victims' relatives are very worried and concerned about the victim, but you seem like you don't care about her at all, one officer remarked. I forced a dismissive smile. We're not relatives, just acquaintances. As the police left, I noticed Cindy King staring at me intently. Feeling a tightness in my chest, I felt my throat go dry. Do you think I'm cold-blooded too? She looked at me and shook her head. I feel like you've been deeply hurt, she said softly. Zion Harris was extremely cautious, constantly changing the meeting location. He thought this was enough to keep him safe, but it also gave the police more time to track him. Finally, through surrounding clues, they found him in an abandoned factory. To escape, he pushed Delia King down the stairs. The police had to prioritize saving her, giving him the chance to slip away. Delia's condition was critical. She spent an entire day in the emergency room but managed to survive. However, her lower back was severely injured, and she would never be able to walk again. Besides this, her mental state was also in serious trouble. She would scream and howl at night without warning. In the worst incident, she grabbed a nurse by the throat, demanding like a vengeful spirit, "Why is it like this? Everything's changed. Everything. How dare you betray me? I'll kill you." She was too difficult to control and had to be sent to a psychiatric hospital. Uncle and aunt had been unwell since she upset them last time, so Cindy and I decided to keep this from them. The police warned us that Zion Harris was still at large and to be careful of any other moves he might make. They assigned plainclothes officers to keep watch around my house and the King family home. They assured me they would catch the culprit as soon as possible. But truthfully, I wasn't that eager for him to be arrested. After all, compared to the just punishment of the law, I was more looking forward to how the underground casino's enforcers would deal with him. The shadows that once plunged me into the abyss have vanished, and I'm in high spirits, tackling tasks with renewed vigor. My name keeps popping up in financial news, praising the young Mr. Clark for his excellence and exceptional achievements. No longer am I known as someone's suitor. All my accolades now add luster to her life. But Cindy King, unaware of the full picture, worries about my situation just like the police do. One night, after working late, I'm walking home while she chatters away, reminding me of safety precautions. On the bustling street, I suddenly spot a familiar figure across the road. Zion Harris's clothes are so filthy their original color is indiscernible. He's limping desperately forward as if fleeing from some monstrous threat. But how could someone on the brink of starvation outrun well-trained thugs? They quickly catch up, dragging him into a deserted alley. Pinned against the wall, his arm is violently twisted into an unnatural angle, the light in his eyes instantly extinguished. Once he's completely subdued, they expertly produce a sack, stuffing him in like a slaughtered animal. Cindy is still talking, her sweet voice pulling me back to reality. I turn my gaze away, looking ahead down the path. The girl's voice will accompany me all the way back to my warm home.